Hello everyone, and this is going to be the first video looking at P5M2. Now, as a reminder, on the board, what you can see are the questions that you need to answer in order to write a really good introduction for this assignment. Now, this assignment is going to be looking at economics. So what we're doing here, we're looking at how things that change in our country can have an impact on the performance of Sainsbury's. Now, first of all, to understand what we look at in economics, we've got to understand the meaning of a key term that we call gross domestic product. Now, what we do, we abbreviate this to mean GDP. Now, a really, really simple way of thinking about GDP is to think about it in terms of this. It's the value of output of our economy in a year. Okay, now all we mean by output is all the different goods and services produced by the people that work within our economy in a year. So, for example, if we were going to be working out the GDP for 2019 in Britain, we would add up the value of all the different products produced by the people that live and work within our economy. Now, last year, the UK's GDP was roughly about £2 trillion. Now, what we can do from this, we can work out something very important. We can work out something that we call the GDP per capita. Now, what this will be calculated is through a formula, which is GDP, so the gross domestic product, divided by the population of our country. Now, what this will give us a rough idea of is the average wage in the UK. Okay, so the GDP, as a reminder, is the value of all the different products produced by the people that live and work in our economy in a year. If we then divide this by the population, it gives us the GDP per capita, which is giving us a rough idea of what the average wage in the British economy is. So last year, our GDP was roughly £2 trillion. If we divide this by roughly the 65 million people that live and work in our economy, we get an average wage of roughly £27,000 per person per year. Right, now what we're going to think about now is how GDP tends to change over time. Now on the board now, I'm going to draw you a very important diagram that we call the business cycle. Now this looks very amateurish, I'm afraid, but I'm not getting this to work very well. Now what we have on this axis is time. So we're measuring how our economy's GDP, so the output produced in our economy, will change over time. So on the vertical axis, we will have GDP. Now, what we would like our economy to do over time is to grow. So what we would like it to do would be to grow like this over time. Now, we call this the trend rate, or the average rate of economic growth in our economy over time. So what this is measuring is the average growth rate. Now, all economic growth is when GDP increases over time. Now, it's really, really important for GDP to increase over time. So what it does mean, it means that people are earning more money. And it means that people have got more money in their pockets, which means they can buy more different goods and services across the country over time. Now, the problem is that economies do not tend to grow like this. We want them to grow nice and steady and stable over time. Now, if we do this, we call it stability. Now, if we had stability in our economy, it would mean that every single year we can predict exactly how much our economy can grow, and we would generally assume that our economy will grow approximately about 2% per year. So that would mean every single year GDP will grow at roughly 2% per year. And that's really, really important, because what it means is that people, they know exactly how much money they will earn from one year to the next. And people need to know their income so they can plan their expenses, pay their bills, and know how much they've got left over to buy all the things that make life worth living, such as holidays and cars and bigger, better houses, etc. Now, the problem is the economy doesn't tend to grow nice and steady like this. the economy tends to grow like this over time. So it zigzags around what we would like it to do. Now, when we're up here, we call this an economic boom. Now, when you're in an economic boom, what is happening is the economy is growing too quickly. So the output of the economy is shooting up, 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 way too much. Now, when you're in a boom on the business cycle, what it means is that businesses are struggling to keep up with the demand for goods and services produced across the economy. So businesses are hiring more and more workers to try and get more and more products onto the shelves for people to buy. But they're finding it really, really difficult to keep up with high demand across the economy. Now, what we then have on the business cycle is something that we call a downturn. Now, for reasons that I won't go into in this video, what will tend to happen is, after a boom, the economy has grown too much, and then it starts to enter a downturn on the business cycle. Now, a downturn is when the rate of economic growth is starting to fall. There's a few sort of signals in the economy that things are not quite as good as what they were originally. So what we might now start to see in the downturn is that businesses are starting to make a little bit less profits, their incomes are starting to fall, they may be starting to get rid of a few of their workers. Now, if this downturn continues, the economy will then move into something that we call a recession. Now, this is really bad, because when you move into a recession, what it now starts to mean is that GDP across the economy is actually starting to fall. So what it means is that the output produced by the country is starting to go down. So that means that car factories are making less cars, shops have got less customers coming through the doors, so they make less clothes, less sandwiches. Holiday companies report that sales are starting to fall. And this could mean that people start to lose their jobs, and that will mean that incomes start to fall across the economy, which means people become poorer. Now, this will then bottom out at this point here. We call this a bust on the business cycle. The economy has hit rock bottom. So wage rates are down across the country. People are therefore poorer. More people are unemployed. Businesses are not making any profits. Some businesses might start to go bust, so they're actually closing down the doors. And financially, the economy is in quite a bad state. But then what tends to happen then is that things start to pick up. Now, this arrow would represent an upturn on the business cycle. If I look at the language used on your assignment brief, we're calling this growth. So the upturn is where growth will again start to pick up on the business cycle. So what is now starting to happen is that GDP is again starting to increase, businesses are starting to produce more goods and services, so output is starting to grow, more people start to get more jobs, and incomes start to increase across the economy. Now, after the upturn, we have this, and what we're moving towards again now is another economic boom. So remember, in an economic boom, what will be starting to happen is that wage rates are growing maybe a little bit too quickly. GDP is increasing a little bit too quickly. Businesses are starting to struggle to keep up with growing demand for goods and services. So they've got shortages, things are becoming more and more scarce. And then that whole cycle will again start. Now, if I was to go to your assignment brief and think about the questions that you've been given, your first job is to think about why you are writing this report. Now here, what you've got to get across is that businesses such as Sainsbury's, they need to understand what is happening in the economy. Because if they don't understand what is happening in the economy, it's very difficult for them to plan for the future in order to remain successful to make profits. Right, now in this section here, what I would like you to do is to Google image search the business cycle. What you will then need to do is to copy and paste this into your work and then briefly explain what the business cycle shows. So remember, the business cycle, it shows how GDP tends to fluctuate through booms and recessions. It will also show stability, and that was that nice upward sloping line. Stability would mean that we've got constant rates of economic growth year after year, which means people can predict for the future more accurately. What you've then got to do is to think about these different stages along the business cycle. We've got the boom. The boom will be where GDP growth rates are very, very high, which means that jobs are readily available for people to be doing, incomes are increasing, and profits are very, very high in businesses. The decline is what comes after the boom. This will be when GDP growth rates are starting to fall. So the economy is not quite performing as well as what it did do before. There might be a few businesses reporting a drop in profits. If we then move into recession, a recession would be where GDP is actually falling across the economy. So unemployment is starting to increase, people's incomes are falling, businesses are starting to report losses. Some businesses might start to go bankrupt. And then hopefully what will then follow that is a period of economic growth. This would be where GDP starts to increase again, people get jobs, wage rates start to increase, and businesses start to perform a little bit better. Now the last section is this here, the ripple effect. Now to get your heads around this, I want you to think about this diagram. You've got here someone chucking a stone onto a pond. If you chuck a stone onto a pond, you get ripples. So, the water will move outwards. Now, a ripple effect in economics is also often called a multiplier effect. And this is the idea that when people spend money in the economy, it will create benefits for other people across the country. So to give you an example, if Sainsbury's were to open another store in Huddersfield, this would then create ripple effects across the local economy. That local store would attract more customers to Huddersfield. This would then create more jobs for local people to do. These local people that have now got jobs in the economy can now start to earn more money. And that would mean these people can now start to buy more products from other businesses across the local economy. So for example, if some of you now got a job in this new Sainsbury's, you can now spend more money in Huddersfield town centre. That will mean that those businesses start to perform better, which means they might start to recruit more people. More people get jobs in those businesses, which means those people can now spend more money, and that will create further benefits for more and more people across the economy. Okay, so hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea about what the ripple effect is, which gives you all the ammunition that you need to tackle this question on the assignment brief. Right guys, that is the end of video 1.